Hello, BookTube. Just this morning, I saw a video on Britta's channel. I'm assuming you're all subscribed to her. If you're not, be sure to correct that. In which she talks about these reading slumps that you all seem to have, and comes up with the absolutely inspired idea that one of a surefire way to get yourself out of a reading slump is to read books about reading. to reconnect, not just launch yourselves at your bookshelves in a vain attempt to find a book that will get you out of your reading slump, but rather to read about the joy of reading that got you into reading in the first place. I thought that was a wonderful idea. She made 5 suggestions. I want to make 5 suggestions as well, just in case that actually does help. Because although I don't ever have reading slumps myself, I don't like hearing about them and other people. They sound terrible. Sorry about that. Seems to be a theme in these videos, and it's giving me the horrible impression that this is going to be a very bad allergy summer for me. I'm really hoping that turns out to be wrong. But anyway, I want to show you 5 books that I picked out along the same lines, just in case you need more recommendations along the ones that Britta made. She made some great ones. But my first one is straight to the heart of the matter. It is The Pleasure of Reading, edited by Antonia Fraser, the great biographer and historian. And it's just a collection of various authors, just dozens of them. Most of them talking about the books that got them into reading in the first place, so childhood reading. But quite a few of them digress into the books they're loving now, or the books they've loved at different periods in their life. And you have all sorts of people here. John Mortimer, Patrick Lee Fermer, Emma Tennant, Saul Bellow. Who are some of these others? Doris Lessing, Margaret Atwood, Judith Kerr, Jan Morris, Philip Ziegler. So all over the fiction and nonfiction spectrum. And if this doesn't get your fires reignited, I don't know what will. And also, at the request of the editor, every author ends their little section with their favorite books, a little paragraph on their favorite books, which is fascinating, each author by author, and also fascinating to compare them and see how many books turn up where. Then another recommendation that I would make if you're feeling yourself in a reading slump would be to read my own kind of literature. Would be to read collections of book essays, book criticism, because often those are glowing with the enthusiasm of reading. And I wanted to pick, I picked one that is one of the greats, one of the very best examples. This is Bartleby in Manhattan by the great Elizabeth Hardwick. And it's just a collection of pieces that she wrote, most of them for the New York Review of Books, which she helped to found, about reading, about the joys of reading. About there are other things in here. A lot of this is occasional prose. So there's for instance, a section on going out to the theater and what you do before and what you do during and what you do after. That's not only a snapshot of a bygone era, but also wonderfully felt, just wonderfully felt. But the sections on books, they're amazingly good, including the title essay, and then my next recommendation is it crosses paths with Britta. She recommended one book that I want to recommend as well, and that's this, My Life with Bob, by Pamela Paul, who is currently the goddess of all our idolatries when it comes to my profession, book reviewing, because she is the editor of the New York Times Book Review. So although, unlike some previous editors of the New York Times Book Review that I could name, unlike them, it would never occur to her. It is nevertheless true that she has in her hands the power to make or break a reputation. And this is the story of Bob, her book of books, a list of books that she has lived with and read, and the circumstances under which that she's kept forever. And I reviewed this book. I loved it, and I strongly recommend it. It will fill you with a very contagious love of reading. I mean, she's an omnivorous reader and a good, strong, fast, observant reader. So she's a great pick to be in the center seat of the most powerful editorial position in the book world. But on top of that, more than any of those things, is the very quality that we're talking about in this video, which is that she loves to communicate the love of reading. it shines off her pages in the Times, just shines off them in a way that it hasn't always done. There's I almost want to say proselytizing. There's almost a proselytizing aspect to her love of books, and I think that's fantastic. I absolutely love it. And this is the stories that she tells in here. There's a mixture of pure reading enthusiasm and also autobiography that you will just love. You will just love it. There's one moment where she's actually with somebody. She's actually with a young man, and she takes off, and he says, I'm going to write with Bob. She's got to dash off and write down an impression, and some things take priorities. So I highly Britta recommended this. I also highly recommend it. And also, while I'm at it, I also strongly recommend that you subscribe to the New York Times Book Review now that she's at the helm. Because we're getting a really, really good, really good era of the book review, an era that is not and in the least bit phoned in, and that's wonderful. The next one is a bit of an oddity here, but I wanted to recommend it anyway because it's just so good. It's by Janice Radway, and it's a pleasure, a feeling for books, and it's her account of the history and the life and the mission of the Book of the Month Club. Those of you who watch Max at Well Done Books, or did, he used to make videos about his love for Book of the Month Club. And that's a legitimate thing, because since the 1920s, the Book of the Month Club has inspired controversy, anger, condemnation at times, but also an untold hundreds of thousands of readers came to their love and had it sustained by this service. And this is the account of the men and women behind that, the searching for books, the choosing them, the laborious arguments back and forth, the discussions, the fortunes of authors that were made or lost. You wouldn't think that an absolutely fascinating book about the Book of the Month Club could be written, but this is it. This is such a book, and I don't doubt but that if you started reading this, you would start to want to read again. Because at its heart, that's what it's all about. It's all about these people who wanted to communicate their love of reading. So I highly recommend it. And then our last book, talk about communicating a love of reading. This particular person did nothing else all day long. This is edited by Leonard Marcus, and it is Dear Genius, the collected letters of Ursula Nordstrom, who was for 30 or 35 or 40 years the head of the Department of Books for Boys and Girls at Harper, and nurtured in that position, I don't even know how many authors who she was sure were geniuses. If she could just get the work out of them, if she could just make sure somehow that they believed in themselves as much as she believed in them. In fact, the back copy here says it just perfectly. Yes, Ursula Nordstrom, director of Harper Department of Books for Boys and Girls from 1940 to 1973, is a legend. One of the most creative forces in children's books. Working with such talents as Maurice Sendak, E.B. White, Margaret Wise Brown, Shel Silverstein, Garth Williams, and John Steptoe, to name only a few of her authors and illustrators, Nordstrom recognized that each was a genius to be nurtured, encouraged, and published, in giving them what they needed most: a bully, a best friend, a teacher, even a mother. She was rewarded with classic children's books that will last for all time. And that's absolutely true. And she knew it when she saw it. When she looked at a proposal or a rough draft or a rough sketch, she had a better instinct than anyone in the world for saying, "Oh, dear, we must go with that. Here, come to my office, sit down and talk." And of course, when you went to her office, no matter what time of day, no matter how much planning or advanced, coordination there had been between the two of you, once you walked in, you had to move a pile of books off the nearest available chair. There were no flat surfaces anywhere in her office that you could actually use. You had to move books to do it. And these are her letters, and she never did anything by halves. She was always completely on, completely energetic. Her colleagues, and her friends, and some of her enemies referred to her as Ursula Maelstrom. And it was a just nickname. So if you can find this, it might be at your library. I find it in used bookstores sometimes. These letters will fill you with fire, with the enthusiasm that she had for finding books. So there you have it. That's 5 more recommendations. I'm sorry, I just reflexively do a Steve pile here with everything. I don't know why. 5 more recommendations for books about books. Bookish books is what Britta called them, to get you out of your reading slump. To which I might only add one detail that Britta left out, which is that in about 10 minutes, you're going to be dead. Okay? And that maybe, given that, you might not want to indulge in reading slumps at all. You might not want to need books to help you get out of them. In roughly 10 minutes, you're going to be flat on your back in a hospital bed with tubes in every hole in your body, staring up at the ceiling, unable to move, unable to go back home, and knowing deep down inside that you're never going to go back home. And when you look back on your life, take my word for it, I absolutely guarantee this minute here, you're not going to think, boy, a long, long time ago, I was all caught up in BookTube and I had so many friends and I watched videos all the time and we always talked about books and it was so much fun. Boy, that was a long time ago. I guarantee you aren't going to think that. When you're on that bed and you're staring up at that ceiling, you're going to think, it wasn't a long time ago. It was a few minutes ago. A few minutes ago. I know this directly because I used to go out to a restaurant just down the street a few blocks with me sainted ma when she was very late in her life, and we were as slow as snails there, and then we had a wonderful time, and we laughed, and we ripped everybody up the back, and we told stories, and then we made our slow snails way back, and by the time we got back, she was tired and bewildered, every single time bewildered, and I finally asked her one day, I said, Ma, why are you bewildered? You know, you're 81 years old. Why is this confusing you every single time? And she said, because I'm not 81 years old. I'm 20 years old. I made that walk in 5 minutes just a few days ago. And she said, no, I'm not. She said, I'm not delusional. I know it wasn't a few days ago, but it was. A few days ago, it feels like a few days ago. I am still me. But everything has changed. That's going to happen to you too. If you're lucky, you'll get a nice long stretch, but it won't be long enough. And if you're not lucky, and plenty of people aren't, you won't get a nice long stretch. And the one thing that will gall you worse than anything at that moment is the time you wasted, the indulgences that you indulged in. That's going to bother you more than anything. So in addition to, Britta didn't go down the skull and crossbones death's head route that I'm doing right now, just so you know, in case you haven't seen her video first, she didn't do that. She was all smiles. And I am too, mostly. But I wanted to end by saying, you don't have any time. None. So no reading slumps, no book hangovers, no waiting to write your book, no waiting to start the next big project. Don't wait, don't wait, don't wait. Don't indulge in these things. The only reason they make sense, the only way they make sense, is if you have forever, and you don't. So in case I've had people ask me why I don't ever have reading slumps, well, that's the reason, because there's no time at all. This is it. This is it. This is all. This is a tiny sliver of a window that you have to be alive and reading and enjoying all of this stuff, and also leaving your mark behind, and then you're gone. So there you go. So we have 5 bookish books to undo a reading slump, and also grim death. That'll do it for now, BookTube, but I'll see you soon. Thank you.